Kia ora. Aloha. It's my distinct pleasure to be with you this evening. At the age of 4.5, I arrived in Aotearoa and began school here into Auckland, and then we moved to Hamilton. So Aotearoa has been my second home, and it's always such a gift and a pleasure to come back. And it's my distinct honor to be with you this evening. There are tribes that I have lived among who navigate and find their way in a heightened state of awareness, what we would refer to as mindfulness, a mind full of awareness. They guide themselves and navigate as wayfinders across vast deserts. And of course, here in the Pacific, we're familiar with Pacific voyagers who sailed and traversed 100 million square miles at a period when European scientists believed the world was flat. No small feat. And the way the wayfinders do this is by synthesizing seemingly unrelated bits of data, the rising and setting of stars, the sequence and directional points of waves, even the slightest hint of color on the underbelly of clouds, help them gain their bearings. This man, Piesmau Piailug, was my mentor for 10 years, and for those of you who don't know Mao, he was considered one of the greatest non-instrument wayfinders in the world. In Micronesia, they call them Palu. They're Micronesian navigator priests. Mao was the Grand Master. Studying with him, there was so much that I learned about a heightened state of awareness, mindfulness. This picture I took on the Andaman Sea just south of Thailand, off an island called Surintai. The shaman here is Moken. The Moken tribe in winter of 2004 were the only tribe that didn't sustain any injury during the 2004 tsunami. They had gone ashore looking for food and gathering food. He noticed and recognized that the birds had stopped singing, and immediately called the people to higher ground. The Moken that were in their boats, the Moken are known as being sea nomads, nomads of the sea, so they live on the water. Those that were on their boats saw the dolphins racing to deeper waters and followed them out. Heightened state of observation and awareness. These people remind me, and they are my guides through a lifetime of research, because they remind us what it means to be in a state of such finely tuned awareness that you can walk into a room and without speaking a word, change the field by your presence. Native Polynesians refer to this as mana. In all of the work that I do in the field of mindfulness, I shall refer to this as mana, and that's what I would like to speak to you about. 3 points that I would like to make. In my work, I travel to some of the most remote parts of the world to study and live among mystics and sages and some of the greatest teachers of our times. And I'm continuously humbled by this presence, like my teacher Mao, that can walk into a room larger than this and read everyone like weather conditions. Can you imagine being a leader in an organization, going into meetings, and being able to read people with that precision? This is mindfulness. And I'll elaborate further about it. So what I will talk about is mindfulness as mana, its relevance in the 21st century in our organizations, in our communities, in our families. and how to cultivate it. So to begin, mana in its truest sense needs nothing. It does not need recognition. It does not need applause. It doesn't even need acknowledgement, because it is. Among these teachers with whom I have studied, the most common denominator among all of them is that it doesn't matter that anyone knows them or not. I live in a Western society in the US where everybody is trying to be noticed. And what it does is fragment and fracture your life force, your mana. But the truest ones know who they are. And by knowing themselves, need not adoration and are not thrown by criticism or judgment. That is a point of power. And within this, Hawaiians call it ea. Ea is personal sovereignty, where you are not owned by the thoughts and the opinions of others. They do not throw you, they do not sway you. You're not up one moment when people are pleased by you or disenchanted when they're not. It's a powerful, powerful place to be. Nelson Mandela exemplified ea. While in a prison cell, he was still a free man. That's what it means to have one's personal sovereignty, is that we really need nothing else but know who we are. And to have that core within ourselves that is so integrally rooted between heaven and earth that we become the most magnificent instruments. And I believe with all of my heart that the way we serve the world, the way we serve our communities, our families, and our organizations is to practice self-leadership. We cannot lead others until we understand what it means to lead oneself. And now let me move on to 21st century leadership, to mindful leadership in this day and age. All too often we are seeing reports in the media and on the news about leaders and their frailties and their foibles and their corruption, and it goes on and on and on. What the world is starving for are leaders, true leaders, that cultivate this mana. We all have it. Sometimes it remains latent until we choose to step into the destiny that we have come to live. And this is what it means to be a mindful leader, and this is what the world needs, and our community needs, and our companies and organizations need. And it does not matter what position or role or title you hold. What matters is that you know who you are and why you are here, and act deliberately from moment to moment with such a high aptitude of self-knowledge and self-knowing and self-awareness. And the last part that I would like to share with you is the cultivation of this mindfulness, or mana. I spend a great deal of my time in South India because India, especially in the South, is still very intact culturally. They remember their wisdom like the women who raised my sisters and me. As children, we would go to the ocean under very specific lunar cycles. And they would know which schools of fish would be swimming. They would leave us as young girls on the ocean, and they would begin to kahea, or chant to the water very quietly, because they needed no one to know who they really were. And I would watch the fish come toward them, and we would gather at the hems of their mu'umu'u. They would scoop up only the fish that we needed and nothing more, and then we would mahalo the ocean and leave. Now that, to me, is really exemplary, an example of mana, because Donald Trump could no sooner go to the ocean and chant fishes. You know what I mean? So when we talk about power and we talk about status, my mind works very differently because I see it all so different. It's so counterintuitive. The world needs that kind of mana, like my Kupuna demonstrated. And in South India, they still practice planting and gathering by the lunar cycles. It's interesting that as children, we would make sure that whatever we planted was blessed. We faced the leaves of the kalo and the sweet potato to the eastern facing sun because it was gentle. And they blessed everything. That degree, that is a beautiful example of mindfulness. That where we stand, we know is holy ground because we stand in it. That when we go to eat, we bless it because we understand the sanctity of what we are doing. In India, I still bear witness to the fact that many of these poor villages understand the deep significance and meaning of everyday life with such a degree of mindfulness. And the cultivation of this degree of awareness and humility, that meditation becomes the sweetest prayer. You know, when we were growing up, we didn't learn formal meditation from the elders. We simply sat with them. Hawaiians call it noho. And so much later on, when I moved to California and Shirley MacLaine was in vogue and people were paying a lot of money, I called home and I said, you know, people pay $300 to noho. I mean, it didn't make sense to me, but you know, however you get there. So cultivation of a way, even if it's a few minutes, of becoming so still that you are able to turn inward. It's the only way that the navigators and the wayfinders and the shaman, the Moken tribe, are able to really know what's going on in the world, that they can bear witness because they become so still, that their senses become so highly and finely attuned. In navigation, we have a practice where when we navigate by the latitude of our minds and the longitude of our hearts, and there is an intersection, a still point, that uses the mind, doesn't prize the mind as Westerners often do. It simply recognizes and honors the mind and the intersection with the heart. And what scientists are understanding is that all information and data is coming through the heart and rapidly going to the brain. But what we find is that there is a still point between the two. And that is where we navigate from and by. And so these are just some very simple thoughts that I leave with you. In a few minutes, we'll open the room up to Q&A, and I'm very happy to take your questions. But in closing, what I'd like to say is this, that all of us have within us the same beautiful capacity and potential that these wayfinders that I spoke about earlier have. These people are not any more special than you or me. They simply know who they are, and they know that what is within them is vast. And this internal guidance system is precise, that when we stop looking outward, asking friends and neighbors and psychics and intuitives and everybody else, when we just quiet that down and bring it home to self, you will find all of the answers waiting for you. Thank you.